Hey guys, I'm so excited to be back with you as we continue learning about people and places of the Bible. So far, we've learned about Noah, Abraham, and Job. This week, we're going to study Isaac, who was Abraham's son. We will learn that God will provide the sacrifice for our sins. Listen closely. Abraham and Sarah were so happy to have Isaac. They were old, but God gave them lots of energy so that they could play with Isaac and teach him all the things he needed to know. As the years passed and Isaac grew into a little boy, Abraham continued to love and obey God. Abraham knew that the only possible way that Isaac could have been born was because God always kept his promises. So Abraham continued to bravely obey God. Before we keep going with Abraham's story, you need to know some words from the Bible that we haven't really talked about yet. Abraham knew these words well. First, you should know the word sin. A sin is anything that someone does that is disobeying God. Adam and Eve sinned when they disobeyed God and listened to the snake instead. And because they were the very first parents and everyone came from them, everyone else sinned too. This means there is a lot of sin in the world, and sin makes us separate from God, which is a big problem that leads to the next important word, sacrifice. God had made a rule for his people. All sin had to be punished, but because he loved them, he made a way so that they wouldn't get the entire punishment that they deserved. Instead of being punished themselves, the people would have to give something special to God that could take the punishment instead of them. They had to give God one of their very best animals. This gift was called a sacrifice. The animals weren't their pets. The animals had been kept to make food or become food. So when the people gave a really good animal to God and the punishment was put on it, the people still felt bad. Giving up a good animal didn't feel happy, but sin shouldn't make us feel happy. It should make us give a sacrifice. When the people gave sacrifices, it also showed they believed God would keep his promises to give them food to eat. The people would make a special place of worship called an altar where they would pray to God and ask him to forgive their sins. And then they would put the animal on top of the altar and kill it. This all might sound sort of scary or sad even, and it was. But remember how God had said there would be death because Adam and Eve ate the fruit on that tree in the garden? Well, this is one of those kinds of deaths that God knew had to happen because of their sin. The really good, amazing, unbelievable makes it so much better news. We don't have to kill animals anymore because of our sin. Why? Well, God is going to show us part of the answer through this story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham knew all about killing an animal to obey God because of his sin. He had learned that God loved him and that God always keeps his promises. And Abraham knew he could trust God. One morning, with all of this in mind, God told Abraham to do something that is probably going to sound very confusing. God told Abraham to take his son Isaac, the son that he loved so much, up to the mountain and to kill his son for the sacrifice. God told Abraham to kill his son, the son that he loved so much. Abraham definitely didn't want to do that, but he knew in his heart that he had to obey God. Abraham told Isaac to go with him up the mountain to give the sacrifice for their sins. Along the way, Isaac was confused and began to ask his dad where the animal was for the sacrifice. His father told him not to worry, that God would provide. Up the mountain they walked, and God showed Abraham where to stop. Abraham built an altar where he would lay the animal to be killed. Only this time there was no animal. His heart must have been beating so hard, and he probably had tears in his eyes as he was worried that maybe God really was going to have him kill his son. Abraham stacked up the wood on the altar, and he even tied Isaac up and put him on the wood. Isaac must have been so confused and scared, and he probably cried as his dad raised the knife in the air above him. Think about how you would feel. But just then, with the knife in the air about to come down on Isaac, God spoke loudly to Abraham and said, "Abraham, Abraham!" He told Abraham to put his hand down and to look in the nearby bush. There, caught in the branches, was an animal. Now Abraham can sacrifice that instead of Isaac. God had provided. I'm sure maybe Abraham gave Isaac a huge hug as he took him off the altar. Abraham had obeyed God and had been willing to give God the thing he loved most, his son. So God said that he would bless Abraham and his whole family and take care of them for all generations. And there was a day coming when God would promise to give them a perfect sacrifice so that we will never, ever have to make sacrifices ever again. I encourage you to read the rest of this story that comes from Genesis 22 so that you can answer the questions on your Isaac page with your family. These questions, some of them are easy and some of them are a little bit more difficult. Who was the father of Isaac? We see this in this story. His father was who? That's right, Abraham. Why did Abraham take Isaac to the land of Moriah? Who was Isaac's wife? How was Isaac's wife chosen? And the list continues. Today in your bag, you'll find that you were given a pack of peanut butter crackers and a fruit roll-up. I encourage you to build an altar with those two things to remind you of the sacrifice that Abraham was going to make, but God provided. You can use the fruit roll-up to make a fire with the flames and use the other cookies to build an altar. Thanks for joining in, and I'll see you soon.